The low hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the dark kitchen. I stared at the tablet in my hands, my knuckles white, my breath a knot of ice in my chest. On the screen, a grainy night vision feed showed the one place I was supposed to feel safe, our living room. But it wasn't safe. It was a crime scene, and my heart was the victim. My wife Sarah was on the couch, her head thrown back in a laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Curled up next to her, his hand resting casually on her thigh, was Leo, her nephew, my nephew-in-law, the 19-year-old boy we had taken in, the boy I had tried to mentor, the boy who was now looking at my wife with a possessive smirk that made my stomach turn. Their voices were low, conspiratorial whispers in the sanctuary of my home. "He has no idea," Leo murmured, his voice a low drawl of youthful arrogance. "He's so wrapped up in the kids and work, he probably thinks you're miserable." Sarah's laugh was sharper this time, a cruel little shard of sound. "Oh, he knows I'm miserable. He just thinks it's because of them. Them, our children. My 10-year-old daughter Maya and our 7-year-old son Ben, sleeping peacefully upstairs, blissfully unaware that their mother was downstairs, blaming their very existence for her betrayal. It's the perfect cover," she continued, her voice dripping with a venom I'd never heard before. "Every time he gets close to figuring out I'm unhappy, I just remind him how draining the kids are, how we never have time for each other because of them. He feels so guilty, he just backs off and tries to be a better dad." A wave of nausea washed over me, so intense I had to grip the counter to stay upright. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a calculated, psychological campaign waged against me, and my own children were being used as human shields for her affair. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was using our family as a weapon against me. I watched as Leo leaned in and kissed her, a long, lingering kiss that was a declaration of war on my entire world. And in that moment, the man who had loved Sarah for 15 years, the man who would have done anything for her, died. A different man was born in his place, a man forged in the cold fire of betrayal, a man who understood that the only way to fight a fire this destructive was to burn everything to the ground. They thought I was a fool, a workhorse, a background character in their sordid little drama. They thought the kids were a burden that made my wife miserable. They were about to learn that this fool was taking notes, and that those kids were the only thing in the world that could make me fight to the bitter end. 1 year earlier, I believed I was the luckiest man alive. My life was a carefully constructed portrait of suburban success. I was a structural engineer, a job I loved that provided a comfortable life for my family. We lived in a 2-story colonial with a sprawling backyard where I'd built a treehouse for Maya and Ben with my own 2 hands. I had Sarah, my college sweetheart, the woman whose laughter had been the soundtrack to my entire adult life, or so I thought. Our life was a rhythm of school runs, soccer practices, work deadlines, and quiet evenings after the kids were in bed. I saw the fatigue in Sarah's eyes, of course. I saw the way her smile sometimes didn't quite reach them, but I chalked it up to the beautiful chaos of raising a family. "We're in the trenches, Alex," she'd say, forcing a weary smile. "It's just this phase. Once the kids are a little more independent, we'll get us back." I believed her. I clung to that promise like a life raft. I took on more of the household duties, handled the morning routine so she could sleep in, and made sure our weekends were filled with family activities I thought would recharge her. I was trying to be a good husband, a good partner, completely oblivious to the fact that the problem wasn't the trenches of parenthood. The problem was that she was already planning her desertion. The first tremor in my perfect world came in the form of a phone call on a rainy Tuesday. It was Sarah's sister, crying hysterically. Leo, her oldest son, had been kicked out of his apartment and dropped out of his community college classes. He was spiraling, and she couldn't handle him. "I don't know what to do, Sarah," she sobbed. "He needs a change of scenery, a stable environment, a strong male role model." The unspoken question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I looked at Sarah, who was already looking at me with pleading eyes. "He's my nephew, Alex," she whispered. "He's family. I had my reservations." I'd only met Leo a handful of times at family gatherings, and he'd always struck me as sullen and entitled, with a smirk that never quite left his face. But I saw the desperation in Sarah's eyes, and I saw a chance to be the hero, the stable man who could fix things. It was my fatal flaw, this need to be the provider, the protector, the solution to every problem. So I agreed. He can stay with us for a few months, I said, sealing my own fate, just until he gets back on his feet. The first few weeks were deceptively calm. Leo was quiet, almost respectful. He kept to his room in the basement, and I made an effort to connect with him. I took him to baseball games, helped him polish his resume, and tried to talk to him about his future. Sarah was effusive in her gratitude. "You're so good with him, Alex," she'd say, kissing me with a passion that had been missing for months. "I knew you'd be the one to get through to him." I preened under her praise, blind to the fact that I wasn't getting through to him at all. I was merely a placeholder, a temporary obstacle. The shift was subtle at first. Sarah started spending more time with Leo, under the guise of helping him with his job applications or giving him life advice. Their conversations would happen in hushed tones in the kitchen after I'd gone to bed. Laughter, low and intimate, would drift up the stairs, and a strange, possessive jealousy would coil in my gut. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She was his aunt. She was trying to help. This was what good people did. But then the little signs started piling up, like stones in my pocket, weighing me down. Leo began treating me with a casual disdain, answering my questions with monosyllabic grunts and rolling his eyes when I tried to enforce house rules. When I brought it up with Sarah, she became fiercely defensive. "You're being too hard on him, Alex. He's been through a lot. He sees you as an authority figure, and he's just rebelling. You need to be more understanding." She made me feel like the villain, the unreasonable tyrant who couldn't find a little compassion for a troubled young man. She was an expert at that, I would later realize, twisting reality until I was the one apologizing for her bad behavior. I started to feel like a guest in my own house. The emotional center of our home had shifted. It was no longer me, Sarah, and the kids. It was Sarah and Leo, with the kids and me orbiting around them like distant moons. She started dressing differently, wearing more makeup, choosing outfits that were a little younger, a little more daring than her usual style. "Just trying to feel good about myself," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand if I complimented her. "It's not for you." The cruelty of that statement only hit me months later. At the time, I just felt a familiar pang of inadequacy. The first real crack in the facade appeared on a Saturday night. I had taken Maya and Ben to a school movie night, and we got home later than expected. The house was dark except for a soft glow from the living room. As I walked in, I saw Sarah and Leo on the couch, watching a movie. But they weren't just watching. They were sharing a blanket, sitting so close their legs were pressed together. Leo's arm was draped across the back of the couch, his fingers just inches from her hair. They sprang apart when I entered, a little too quickly. "Oh, you're back early," Sarah said, her voice a little breathless. "The movie ended sooner than we thought," I replied, my eyes fixed on the space that had been between them. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, a strange cocktail of guilt and defiance. I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it. They were just family, getting comfortable while watching a movie. But my gut, an organ I had learned to ignore in favor of Sarah's explanations, was screaming that I had just walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, the physical distance between us felt like a chasm. She was a stranger, and I was sleeping with the enemy. The blame game started in earnest a few weeks after the couch incident. It was no longer just about Leo's troubled past. It was now about our children's present. Sarah began to weaponize motherhood, using it as a shield for her increasing distance and secrecy. Every complaint, every sigh of exhaustion was framed around the crushing weight of being a mother. "I'm just so touched out, Alex," she'd say, pulling away when I tried to hug her. Between Maya needing help with her homework and Ben's tantrums, by the end of the day, I don't have anything left to give. She painted a picture of a woman drowning in domestic obligations, a martyr to the needs of her children, and I, the dutiful husband, tried to save her. I took over bath time, bedtime stories, and the morning school rush. I packed their lunches, refereed their arguments, and became the default parent for everything. I thought that by lightening her load, I would give her the space she needed to find her way back to me. All I was really doing was clearing her schedule, so she had more time to spend with her nephew. The kids became the scapegoats for everything. If we argued, it was because we were both so stressed from parenting. If she was irritable, it was because Ben had kept her up the night before. If our sex life was non-existent, it was because she just didn't feel like a sexual being after a day of wiping noses and cutting crusts off bread. Leo, meanwhile, was her confidant in this narrative. I would overhear snippets of their conversations. They're just at that age where they need so much, she'd tell him with a dramatic sigh. Alex doesn't get it. He gets to escape to work all day. Leo would nod sympathetically, patting her arm. You're a saint for putting up with it all, he'd say, his voice full of false sincerity. They were building a narrative together, brick by brick, painting me as the oblivious husband and her as the suffering saint, completely erasing the reality that she was an adult woman making a conscious choice to betray her family. The breaking point, the moment my denial finally shattered, came on a Thursday. I came home from work early, hoping to surprise Sarah and the kids with takeout from their favorite pizza place. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Leo's car was gone. Sarah's car was there. I walked in, calling their names, but the house was silent. I checked the whole house, but they were gone. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I called her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called Leo. Voicemail. An hour passed, then two. My worry curdled into a dark, ugly suspicion. I did something I had never done before. I went into our home office and opened her laptop. I felt like a trespasser, a creep, but the need to know was a physical force, pushing me forward. Her email was open, and there it was. A hotel confirmation. For that afternoon, a room with one king-size bed at a boutique hotel downtown, booked under her maiden name. Check-in was at 2 p.m. Check-out was at 5 p.m. It was now 6:30 p.m. My world didn't just crack, it imploded. Every memory, every shared laugh, every promise was instantly contaminated, rendered a lie. I thought about my kids, who would be home from their after-school program soon, expecting pizza and a normal Thursday night with their parents. The sheer calculated deception of it all stole the air from my lungs. She had planned this. She had waited for me to be at work and the kids to be at school. She had booked a hotel to spend the afternoon with her nephew, a boy I had welcomed into my home. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. The old Alex would have confronted her, would have screamed and cried and demanded an explanation. He would have played right into her hands, given her the drama she could twist and use against him. See how crazy he is, she'd say. This is what I have to live with. But the old Alex was gone. In his place was a man who understood that a war fought with emotion was a war already lost. This was a war that had to be fought with facts, with evidence, with cold, hard, undeniable proof. My wife and her nephew had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated their opponent. They thought I was just a sad, predictable husband. They had no idea I was an engineer, and I was about to build the most solid case of my life. The days that followed the discovery of the hotel confirmation were the longest of my life. I moved through my home like a ghost, a silent observer in a life that was no longer my own. I played my part, the loving husband, the doting father, but behind my eyes, a cold, methodical plan was taking shape. The engineer in me took over. A problem had been identified, a structural failure in the foundation of my marriage. The cause, a parasitic infestation. The objective, to document the extent of the damage and execute a controlled demolition. My first step was to become an expert in a field I never thought I'd need, domestic surveillance. I spent hours at the public library, using their computers to research state laws on recording conversations and video. I learned about one-party consent, about the legality of placing cameras in my own home. I became a scholar of betrayal, my nights filled with articles on infidelity, manipulation, and narcissistic behavior. The face staring back at me from the pages was Sarah's. The descriptions of gaslighting, of blame-shifting, of creating a narrative of victimhood. It was a perfect portrait of the woman I was married to. My next stop was an electronics store an hour away, in a city where no one would recognize me. I used cash to purchase 2 small high-definition nanny cams and a handful of voice-activated audio recorders no bigger than a sugar cube. Holding the small, innocuous devices in my hand, I felt a strange sense of power. These were not tools of a jealous husband. They were the instruments of a man seeking truth. Placing the cameras was a nerve-wracking experience. One went in the living room, tucked into a bookshelf, with a clear view of the couch that had become their throne. The other went in the kitchen, hidden among the decorative plates on the hutch, aimed at the table where they held their whispered conferences. The audio recorders were easier to place, one under the coffee table, one in Sarah's car, and one I kept in my pocket, a silent witness to my daily interactions with them. I became a master of deception, a skill I despised but now found essential for survival. I had to create reasons to be out of the house to retrieve the memory cards. I faked work emergencies, invented errands, and even feigned a sudden interest in evening jogging. Each time I swapped a full memory card for an empty one, my heart hammered in my chest. Each time I sat in my car in a deserted parking lot, transferring the files to a password-protected hard drive, I felt a piece of my old self die. The evidence I gathered was a slow, agonizing drip of poison. It wasn't just the grand betrayals. It was the 1,000 tiny cuts. It was the audio of Sarah on the phone with her sister, my sister-in-law, laughing about how gullible I was. "He actually believes I'm just stressed about the kids," she cackled. "He's trying so hard to be a better dad, it's almost pathetic." It was the video of Leo lounging on the couch, watching TV, while I was outside mowing the lawn in the sweltering heat. Sarah walked in, handed him a beer, and ruffled his hair with a tenderness she hadn't shown me in years. It was the recording from her car, where she and Leo discussed their future. "Once I have the house in full custody, we can sell this place," she said, her voice chillingly practical. "We can move somewhere new, start fresh. The alimony and child support will be more than enough to get us started." Leo's reply was equally horrifying. "What about Maya and Ben?" "They're kids. They'll adjust," she said dismissively. "Besides, it's better for them to be with a happy mother, and I haven't been happy with their father for a very long time." That was the moment I understood the true depth of her cruelty. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to take my children and my home and use my money to fund a new life with her nephew, all while convincing herself that it was for the kids' own good. The blame the kids narrative wasn't just a cover for her affair. It was her justification, the lie she told herself so she could sleep at night. I listened to hours of their conversations, my rage turning into a glacier of cold, hard resolve. They spoke of me with such contempt, such dismissal. I was boring, predictable, a workhorse, a convenience. I was the stable, reliable fool who paid the bills and raised the kids while they lived out their sordid fantasy. My plan began to form, not out of a desire for petty revenge, but out of a fierce, primal need to protect my children. She would not take them. She would not use them as pawns in her sick game. She would not destroy their lives and then claim it was for their own benefit. I needed a stage, a place where the truth could be revealed in a way that was undeniable, inescapable, and utterly devastating for them. And then, Sarah handed it to me on a silver platter. "Alex," she said one evening, her voice full of fake enthusiasm, "our 15th anniversary is next month. I was thinking we should throw a party, a big one, renew our vows, show everyone how strong we are, even with all the stress." The audacity of it was breathtaking. She wanted to stand up in front of our family and friends and lie to use our anniversary as another prop in her play. The irony was so perfect, so beautifully poetic, that I almost laughed. "That's a wonderful idea, honey," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Let's do it." The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the director, a man they had written off as a fool, was about to make sure the final act was one they would never forget. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video from. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales to life. Enjoy listening. The month leading up to the anniversary party was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I became the best husband I had ever been, a walking, talking caricature of a man blissfully in love. I brought Sarah flowers, left her little notes, and talked endlessly about how excited I was to renew our vows. On the surface, I was a man desperate to reconnect with his wife. In reality, I was a general meticulously planning a surprise attack. My every action was designed to lull them into a state of complete and utter security. The more I played the part of the devoted husband, the more complacent and arrogant they became. They saw my efforts not as a sign of love, but as a confirmation of my pathetic desperation. They thought I was a man terrified of losing his wife, when in fact, I was a man who couldn't wait to get rid of her. Sarah threw herself into the party planning with a manic energy. She spent hours deciding on caterers, floral arrangements, and a playlist of our songs, a collection of music that now sounded like a funeral dirge to me. She would ask for my opinion, and I would agree with every suggestion, my mind elsewhere, calculating camera angles and speaker placements. "It has to be perfect, Alex," she'd say. "I want this to be a day everyone remembers." "Oh, I guarantee it will be," I'd reply, and the double meaning would hang in the air, completely unnoticed by her. My evenings were spent in my workshop in the garage, my supposed sanctuary where I de-stressed from work. They thought I was building bookshelves. I was actually editing hours of audio and video, compiling my evidence into a devastating narrative. I bought a new laptop, one they didn't know about, and used sophisticated software to clean up the audio, enhance the video, and add subtitles to their whispered confessions. I created a 10-minute video, a highlight reel of their betrayal. It started with seemingly innocent moments of them being a little too close, a little too familiar. It then escalated, showing their clandestine meetings, their stolen kisses in my kitchen, and their casual cruelty. The audio was the most damning part. I overlaid their conversations about me, about the kids, about their plans to steal my life from me. I ended the video with the audio from Sarah's car, her cold, practical voice talking about selling the house and using my child support money to start a new life with Leo, followed by her chilling line, "They're kids, they'll adjust." It was a masterpiece of emotional destruction, and I was the anonymous artist. My biggest challenge was the kids. I had to protect them from the impending explosion. I arranged for them to have a sleepover at a friend's house on the night of the party. I told Sarah it was so we could have a romantic night to ourselves after the guests left. She bought it completely, delighted at the thought of not having to deal with them. "That's so thoughtful, Alex," she said. "It'll be nice to not have to worry about them for once." The casual cruelty of her words was another drop of fuel on the fire of my resolve. 2 days before the party, I met with a divorce attorney, a shark named Jessica who had been recommended by a colleague. I walked into her office and laid everything out on her conference table, the hard drive with the video, bank statements showing unexplained withdrawals by Sarah, the hotel confirmation. I played her the 10-minute video. She watched the entire thing without a word, her expression shifting from professional interest to barely concealed shock. When it was over, she just looked at me. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "this is not just grounds for divorce. This is a strategic military campaign. What you have here is enough to ensure she gets nothing. No alimony, no house, and with the emotional manipulation and her stated intent to use the children, she will be lucky to get supervised visitation, music to my ears." We spent the next 2 hours mapping out the legal strategy. The divorce papers would be filed the morning of the party. A process server would be waiting outside our house, ready to serve her the moment the party ended. We would file for an emergency custody order, using the video as evidence of her unfitness as a parent. Jessica was impressed by my meticulousness. "Most people come in here with just anger and suspicion," she said. "You've come in with a conviction. You've already done all the hard work. Now, we just let her walk into the trap you've so perfectly set." On the day of the party, I woke up feeling a strange, surreal calm. Sarah was a whirlwind of nervous energy, flitting around the house, micromanaging the caterers, and barking orders at Leo, who was acting as her loyal assistant. I watched them, this little team of traitors, working together to create the perfect setting for their own immolation. I moved through the day like I was in a dream, every action pre-planned, every word scripted. I helped set up the large projection screen in the backyard, ostensibly for a sentimental slideshow I had prepared. I positioned the outdoor speakers, testing the sound levels, to ensure every damning word would be heard with crystal clarity. As guests began to arrive, friends and family who had known us for years, I felt a pang of sadness. They were here to celebrate a lie. They were about to witness the ugliest truth imaginable. I greeted them with smiles and handshakes, accepting their congratulations and well wishes, feeling like the biggest imposter in the room. Sarah looked radiant in a new white dress, playing the part of the adoring wife to perfection. She clung to my arm, laughing a little too loudly, her eyes shining with a triumph that only I understood was about to be extinguished. Leo was by her side constantly, playing the role of the helpful nephew, but the looks they exchanged when they thought no one was watching were filled with a shared, secret excitement. They thought this was their victory party. The evening progressed, a slow-motion train wreck that only I could see coming. There were toasts from my best man, from Sarah's sister, Leo's mother, who was blissfully unaware of the viper she had sent into my home. There was dancing, there was laughter, there was a grotesque parody of a happy family. Finally, the moment came. The sun had set, and the backyard was lit by strings of fairy lights. It was time for the vow renewal and my slideshow. I took the microphone, my heart a steady cold drum in my chest. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear and strong. I looked at Sarah, who was beaming at me, her eyes misty with fake emotion. 15 years. It's a long time. And in that time, I've learned a lot about love, about commitment, and about truth. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I've put together a little video, I continued, to celebrate our journey and to honor the truth of our marriage. I turned to Leo. "Leo, my man, could you hit the lights and start the video?" He grinned at me, giving me a thumbs up, the clueless architect of his own demise. He hit a button on the laptop, and the screen behind me flickered to life. The first images were innocuous, photos of Sarah and me in college, at our wedding, holding our newborn children. Soft music played, the guests murmured in appreciation. Sarah squeezed my hand, a tear rolling down her cheek. Then, the music stopped. The screen went black for a second, and then a new image appeared, a grainy night vision shot of our living room couch. The guests stirred, confused. I felt Sarah's hand go rigid in mine. The first audio clip played, Leo's arrogant voice clear as a bell in the silent backyard. He has no idea. The video played on, clip after clip, image after image. The stolen touches, the whispered insults, the plans to ruin me. I watched the faces of our guests transform from confusion to shock, to disgust, to righteous anger. I saw Leo's mother, her face ashen, staring at her son as if he were a monster she had never seen before. I didn't look at Sarah, but I could feel the heat of her humiliation, the seismic shock of her world collapsing. The video reached its crescendo with the audio from her car, her cold voice talking about selling my house and using my children as a meal ticket. They're kids, they'll adjust. Her voice echoed through the stunned silence. The video ended, the screen went black. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the chirping of crickets, oblivious to the human carnage. Then, I turned to face my wife. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Her beautiful performance was over. The real Sarah was finally on display. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "In front of everyone, you were the one who wanted a day everyone would remember." I said, my voice devoid of all emotion, "And as for truth, well, the truth shall set you free." Our vows, I believe they mentioned something about forsaking all others. That's when she lunged at me, not with tears, but with nails and teeth, a cornered animal lashing out. But my best man and her own father were there instantly, holding her back as she screamed obscenities at me. The chaos erupted. Guests were yelling, some at her, some at Leo, who stood frozen, his face pale with terror. I saw Sarah's sister walk over to her son and slap him across the face, a sharp, cracking sound that cut through the noise. I simply stood there, watching the demolition I had so carefully planned. Just as Sarah was being half dragged, half carried into the house by her mortified parents, she turned and screamed the words that sealed her fate forever. "It's your fault," she shrieked, her voice raw with fury, pointing a shaking finger at me. "All of it, you and your damn kids. You smothered me. I had no life. I had no choice." There it was, her final, pathetic defense. In front of 50 witnesses, she had confessed. She had blamed our children for her affair. She had admitted that her misery was not a product of circumstance, but a choice she had made, a narrative she had created to justify her own weakness and cruelty. At that moment, a man in a crisp suit stepped out from the shadows near the front gate. He walked calmly through the chaos and handed Sarah a thick envelope. "You've been served," he said, his voice professional and detached. Her face, already contorted with rage, crumpled into utter disbelief. It was over. The demolition was complete. The crowd parted as I walked away from the wreckage of my marriage, leaving them to sift through the rubble of their lies. I didn't look back. I got in my car, drove to my friend's house, and held my sleeping children, the only part of my life that was still real, the only part that had ever truly mattered. The aftermath was even uglier than the party itself, a brutal slog through the mechanics of dismantling a life. The divorce was a war of attrition, and Sarah came out fighting with the only weapons she had left, lies and manipulation. Her first move was to play the victim. She filed a response to my petition, claiming I was an emotionally abusive and controlling husband, that I had driven her into the arms of another man out of sheer desperation and loneliness. She painted a picture of herself as a neglected wife, starving for affection, and me as a cold, work-obsessed provider who cared more about his blueprints than his own family. The centerpiece of her defense was her most monstrous lie, that the children had been the primary source of our marital problems. Her legal argument was that my obsessive focus on the kids, combined with the overwhelming stress of motherhood, had created an environment where she felt isolated and unseen. It was a bold, disgusting strategy, attempting to legally codify the very excuse she had used to justify her affair. She was trying to convince a judge that our children were a legitimate reason for her infidelity, but she had made a critical miscalculation. She assumed I was fighting with emotion. She had no idea that I had an engineer's blueprints for her destruction. In the courtroom, during the deposition, her lawyer, a slick man with a cheap suit and an even cheaper smile, tried to grill me on my parenting. "Mr. Henderson, would you say you prioritize your children's needs above your wife's?" he asked, leaning forward with a theatrical air of concern. "I would say I prioritize my children's needs, period," I replied calmly, as any good parent should. "But did this focus on your children lead to a breakdown in your marital intimacy?" "My wife's affair with her 19-year-old nephew led to a breakdown in our marital intimacy," I stated, my voice even. The room went silent. Jessica, my lawyer, simply smiled. When it was Sarah's turn, Jessica didn't attack her with anger. She dismantled her with surgical precision, using the evidence I had gathered. She played audio clips of Sarah laughing with Leo about my pathetic attempts to be a good father. She showed stills from the video of Sarah and Leo embracing on the couch while the kids were at school. And then she brought up the party. "Mrs. Henderson," Jessica said, her voice deceptively gentle. "At your anniversary party, in front of 50 witnesses, you stated, and I quote, 'You and your damn kids smothered me. I had no life.' Do you recall saying that?" Sarah paled. "I was upset. I wasn't thinking clearly." "So when you were thinking clearly," Jessica pressed, "did you or did you not repeatedly tell your nephew that our children were the reason for your unhappiness and the perfect cover for your affair?" She then played the audio clip from the living room camera, where Sarah explicitly stated that very thing. Sarah's entire case crumbled. The judge looked at her with open contempt. Her attempt to use our children as a shield had not only failed, it had exposed her as a manipulative and unfit mother. The court's decision was swift and brutal. I was granted sole physical and legal custody of Maya and Ben. Sarah was granted supervised visitation twice a month at a court-approved facility. The judge's ruling was scathing, citing her profoundly disturbing attempt to blame her own moral failings on her innocent children. The financial settlement was equally devastating for her, due to the evidence of adultery and my documentation of her using our joint funds for her affair, the hotel rooms, gifts for Leo. The judge awarded me the house and a significantly larger portion of our marital assets. She was denied any form of alimony. She had wanted to take everything from me. Instead, she left with nothing but her clothes and the consequences of her choices. Leo faced his own reckoning. His parents, horrified and ashamed, kicked him out. He was ostracized by the entire family. Last I heard, he was working a dead-end job in another state. his youthful arrogance replaced by the bitter reality of a life derailed by his own predatory behavior. The day the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse feeling not triumphant, but hollowed out. I had won, but the victory felt like surviving a plane crash. You're alive, but you're standing in a field of wreckage that used to be your life. The real work, the work of rebuilding, was just beginning. I sold the house, that beautiful colonial that had become a monument to my family's destruction. There were too many ghosts in those walls. I used the money to buy a smaller, more modern house in a different school district, a place with no memories, a blank slate where we could start over. The kids and I started therapy, both together and separately. We had to learn a new language for our family, a language built on honesty and trust. There were difficult conversations, tears, and late-night talks where Maya would ask me questions I didn't know how to answer. Did Mom never love us? She asked once, her small voice breaking my heart. Your mom is a person who got very lost, I told her, choosing my words carefully. And when people are lost, they sometimes do things that hurt the people they are supposed to love the most. But her getting lost has nothing to do with you or Ben. You are and always have been worthy of love. It was a slow process, but gradually, the shadows began to recede. The laughter returned to our home, genuine and unforced this time. We had movie nights and game nights, and I taught them both how to cook, our kitchen filled with the messy, joyful chaos of a family finding its footing again. 6 months after the divorce, I was in the grocery store when I saw Sarah's sister, Leo's mother. We locked eyes across the produce section, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. She looked tired, older. She walked over to me, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. Alex, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I am so sorry. For everything. For what he did, for not seeing what she was. It wasn't your fault, I said, and I meant it. I should have known, she said, tears welling in her eyes. A mother should know what her son is capable of, and a sister should know her own sister. We stood there for another moment in silence, two survivors of the same shipwreck. How are the kids? She asked. They're good, I said with a real smile. They're strong. We're getting there. You're a good father, Alex, she said, and then she turned and walked away. I never saw her again. A year later, life had found a new, quieter rhythm. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a builder, constructing a new life on a foundation of truth and self-respect. My work at the engineering firm took on a new meaning. I wasn't just building structures anymore. I was creating safe spaces, something I had failed to do in my own home. I was promoted to lead a new department focused on sustainable and community-oriented design, a job that felt more aligned with the man I was becoming. Maya and Ben were thriving. The therapy had given them the tools to process their mother's betrayal, and our new life, free from the constant tension and unspoken lies of our old one, had allowed them to flourish. Maya had joined the debate team, her voice strong and confident. Ben had discovered a love for painting, his canvases exploding with a color and joy that had been muted for too long. Sarah's supervised visits were sporadic. The kids found them awkward and painful. She would try to play the part of the loving mother, but the performance was hollow and they saw right through it. After a few months, she stopped coming altogether. She sent them birthday cards and Christmas presents, empty gestures from a woman who had become a stranger. I learned through the grapevine that she had moved to a different city, was working as a receptionist, and living in a small apartment. The vibrant, confident woman who had been the center of my world was gone, replaced by a ghost living a life of quiet desperation. 2 years after the demolition of my old life, I was sitting on the porch of our new house, watching Maya and Ben play in the yard. They were laughing, chasing a soccer ball, their faces bright with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. The sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. I had learned to be both a father and a mother, to be the one who could fix a bike chain, and also the one who could offer a hug and a patient ear after a tough day at school. I had discovered a strength in myself I never knew I possessed, a resilience forged in the crucible of betrayal. I had started dating again, cautiously at first. I was a different man now, one who valued honesty and kindness above all else. I was no longer looking for a woman to complete me, but for a partner to share a life that was already whole. That evening, as I tucked Ben into bed, he looked up at me with his serious 7-year-old eyes. "Dad," he said, "are you happy now?" I thought about the man I used to be, the man who measured his happiness by his wife's smile, the man who had been so blind to the rot beneath the beautiful surface of his life. And I thought about the man I was now, a man whose happiness was measured by the sound of his children's laughter and the quiet strength of his own heart. "Yeah, buddy," I said, kissing his forehead. "I'm very happy. I had walked through fire, but I had not been consumed. I had lost a wife, but I had found myself. And in the end, I had learned that the most important structures we can ever build are not the ones made of steel and concrete, but the ones we build within ourselves, the ones founded on the unshakable bedrock of truth." They had tried to blame my children for their sins, but in the end, it was my children who had saved me, who had given me a reason to fight, a reason to build a new world from the ashes of the old one. The best revenge wasn't the public humiliation or the legal victory. It was this quiet, peaceful, happy life.